All right, you know who my next guest is, MMA journalist James Lynch, and he is here to join me as we preview UFC Fight Island 7, headlined by Calvin Kattar and Max Holloway. James, how are you?
I'm fantastic, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, it's my pleasure, and I am very excited for this card. I mean, all three of these events that are down at Fight Island are really exciting. We'll dive into this first one here shortly, but first, tell everyone what you've been up to. Obviously, you freelance for what, like 45 different outlets now. Just give us an update on how everything's going.
Everything's going well, man. I love it. I love freelancing. I know you're in the same boat as I am, but yeah, I think it's about 12 outlets I work for. I do a couple podcasts as well with Chris Cyborg, Jim West, the coach of MMA Gold. I do my own podcast on my own channel as well on top of that. And then, yeah, just it's been fun, man. The thing I love is that I get all different types of work all the time. So it's like a lot of variety. Like I even do, I don't know if anyone saw the behind the scenes video blog I did like a month ago. Like I even do some NFL stuff for this company. I do some social media clips for them, some hockey stuff as well. So it's a lot of variety, but I wouldn't change a thing. I'm the boss of everything, which is awesome. So it's really really lucky, very grateful to be in this position.
Yeah, well, you definitely deserve it. Is this the ideal position for you right now? I know your job has changed. I mean, you used to have a full-time position for the score. Is this really what you hope to be doing as your career evolves?
I'm always looking for the next step. I mean, I'd be open to full-time positions if they were available again. I'm a little hesitant with what happened last time. I mean, I definitely won't take a full-time job with a, like an upstart, thing, just because like I saw what happened last time with that. And it's just like, it's tough. I'd rather join like a team that's already established or something. But I mean, honestly, like if I never get hired at like an ESPN or Junkie or whatever, I'm fine with that. I get to do this full-time. I'm making good money. Like I'm able to, pay my mortgage, feed my family, all that stuff. So I'm in a good spot. And I think eventually, like the cool thing would be if I could just do everything off my YouTube channel, not have to work for outlets. And that way I control 100% of what I'm doing. For now, obviously, kind of like you, like I have outlets that pay me for my content. It would be great if I could just get sponsors and just do everything on my own channel. That would be the ideal thing. But I'm always looking ahead, always looking to improve. So we'll see what the future holds. But I'm super, like I said, grateful to be doing this as it is right now. So
For sure. You're kind of like, I guess I could say the pioneer as far as video interviews go for the MMA game. Do you feel like I guess the journalistic side of things are continuing to evolve? I mean, I look around and I see more and more people doing video interviews, podcasts popping up all over the place. Do you feel like in the next 2, 5, 10 years from now, you're going to see MMA in a similar, I guess, situation as like, NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, that kind of stuff?
yeah, I think, well, I like when I started doing video interviews, there was only two other people doing video interviews, Frank Trigg at MMA Oddsbreaker and Karen Bryant. And that was it. I mean, there was no one else. And now everyone's doing it. Yeah, I see video interviews all the time. I think on my YouTube subscription channel, I subscribe to like 300 channels because there's just so many people doing MMA content. And I kind of like keeping an eye on what people are doing, who they're interviewing. I always like keeping an eye out for what, and it's not even like a competition thing. It's more of just like being aware of what people are doing and what they're up to. So for me, yeah, I think video is always going to be dominant. You're seeing now especially with COVID, everyone's having to work from home. People are having to be creative. Like when COVID hit, it really didn't affect me at all because I've been doing this for so long anyways, the remote stuff. So I was sort of fortunate. I already had a studio. I had good equipment. Like for me, that's sort of been just par for the course. So yeah, to answer your question, I think it's going to continue. Video is always going to be, definitely something to, sort of dominate the industry. Like I think every major outlet now has a video team, has people that can do it. So yeah, I think it'll only get bigger come that time, 5-10 years.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Before we dive into this great card headlined by Kattar and Holloway, I do want to get your take on the rematch between Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier. I am so hyped for this fight, James. I'm a big Conor McGregor fan. I'll just get that right up there in the open. But I also love Dustin Poirier. This is one of those fights where I kind of don't want to see either guy lose, but there's got to be a winner and a loser. So how do you envision this second fight playing out?
It's so interesting because a lot of people look at this fight differently than I do, which is, a lot of people are convinced that they're buying into what McGregor's saying, 60-second knockout. But I want to remind people that Poirier's been a lot more active. I know people will point out that Poirier and McGregor only fought once last year, but if you look since 2015, Ryan, I think Poirier's fought almost 11, 12 times. McGregor's only fought, I think, 3 or 4 times. I mean, that is a big difference if you look at overall activity since basically McGregor won the lightweight title. He hasn't fought a lot. So, and I know he's not sitting on the couch doing nothing, but still to be in the cage that much, I think is an advantage for Poirier. It could also be something that hurts him. I mean, Poirier's taken a lot of damage. He's a guy that gets hit a lot. Even in that Dan Hooker fight, you saw him take some shots in that one. But what's interesting to me is that this fight is at 155, where I think Poirier is not as susceptible to getting knocked out. And for people who say he has a bad chin, well, I'll point to the Dan Hooker and Justin Gaethje fights. I mean, those guys have pretty good knockout power, and Poirier was able to get wins over both of them. So that's interesting. The other thing is when they first fought, Poirier, I think had only been a couple fights in an American top team. So now he's sort of a veteran there now. He's at a great camp. That's another feather in his cap. But I think ultimately McGregor just does things in the octagon that you don't see from the average person. And his knockout power, I think he's got the best knockout power in that division. So, if McGregor goes out there, I think more likely, I think you're going to see McGregor get maybe a second or third round finish. I don't think it's going to be a quick 60-second finish like he expects. But as the fight goes longer, Poirier has been in those battles. He won an interim title over Max Holloway, which I think people don't give him enough credit for. I mean, Max Holloway, last time I checked, I mean, I know we're going to get into it here, but last time I checked, he's still a top fighter. And for Poirier to beat him the way he did, I don't think people give him enough credit for that. So if the fight goes longer, I think it favors Poirier. But I think if you're a betting person, Conor McGregor winning in rounds 2 or rounds 3 is probably going to happen just because Poirier does get hit a lot, and you can't take a shot from a Conor McGregor. You can maybe take a shot from Dan Hooker, but not from Conor McGregor. So yeah, I think McGregor probably wins that fight.
Yeah. Have you heard any, I guess, rumors as far as the Nate Diaz fight that's potentially, going to be made? Is there anything, any insider, things that you can give us here?
Well, I do a podcast with his manager, and obviously he has to be careful about when information gets out there as well. But I haven't heard any intel. I just knew that Nate was coming back this year. When Dana said that yesterday, I was a bit surprised because I figured with Diaz, he's more about the money, right? So I would think, when Dana's saying he's going to fight a contender and possibly get back into the title picture, I'm kind of confused because I don't think that's really what Nate has been known for. He's taking these money fights, right? Like he fights like Masvidal, which really Nate was never going to fight with that intention of fighting Kamaru Usman or something, for example, right? Like the intention was just making a lot of money. So for me, it's like if he goes to lightweight, well, the only money fights are like McGregor, maybe Ferguson, but like him fighting like an Oliveira or a Gaethje or, even like like anyone else in that division, it doesn't seem like a money fight for Nate. So I'm a little confused why you'd want to take that fight. Who is it? I don't know. He said it's not Ferguson. He said it's not McGregor. So it really leaves us Gaethje, Oliveira, and maybe Rafael Dos Anjos. I watched that Dos Anjos fight the first time. I mean, Nate got dominated in the wrestling. I don't know if that's changed if they do fight again, so I'm not sure if it's that. If he fights Oliveira, I'm picking Oliveira in that fight. I think he deserves. Oliveira shouldn't have to take that fight. Oliveira should be getting the title shot. He's destroyed his last 2 opponents in Kevin Lee and Tony Ferguson. That should be enough to get him a title shot. And for Gaethje, yeah, you could do that fight. I think that would be fun. Sign me up. I'm definitely down to watch that fight. But I do think that Gaethje has advantages there as well. If he chooses to use it, which I know he doesn't too often, if Gaethje chooses to use his wrestling, it's a clear path to victory because that's what the Diaz brothers, unfortunately, that's their kryptonite is wrestlers. We've seen it time and time again. So I think if I'm a betting man, maybe it's Gaethje.
Yeah, I actually am leaning towards Oliveira. I feel like I have a gut feeling it's going to be Charles. That really would be a stylistic matchup that everyone, especially the hardcores, would love to see. Oliveira's BJJ, and Nate is a black belt on the ground too. He's just so well rounded. So either way, having the Diaz brothers back in the game, that excites me. So I'm looking forward to it. All right, let's dive into this card, UFC Fight Island 7. Before we get to the main card, I do want to start with the undercard. Is there one fight that really stands out to you? The one that stood out to me initially was Omari Akhmedov versus Tom Breeze, but that was moved to Wednesday. So now when you look at the undercarders, the one that stands out as you can't miss.
I mean, there's a lot of good fights on this undercard. I really like the Puna Soriano and Dusto Todorovic fight, a pair of Contender Series veterans. Puna's been out almost the whole year. I did have a chance to speak with him before this fight, and he mentioned he basically had a concussion. And with that, you got to be really careful. I mean, we've seen it in other sports. We've seen it even in MMA. I mean, Chris Holdsworth's not fighting anymore. TJ Grant's not fighting anymore because of concussion issues. So Puna took a full year off. I'm curious to see how he performs. Outside of that, he's looked great. I mean, he got a nice win on Contender Series, got a nice knockout win in his debut. Dusko Todorovic has looked outstanding as well, though, undefeated. I mean, that's what's so cool about this fight. Someone's got to lose in this one. Todorovic, good win over Teddy Ash, guy I know quite well up here in Canada on Contender Series, got that win and then got a nice win in his debut. So it's a case of the UFC figuring out who the better Contender Series prospect is, and that tends to lead to a better fight. So I'm really looking forward to that one. And I got to take Dusko in this fight. I think the upside's a little bit more in him. I think Puna's a little undersized for middleweight. We'll see. But I think Dusko's probably going to take that one.
Yeah, is that on the main card now? I'm looking on Tafa.
Actually, yeah, it is on the main card. I just looked because of the I was just looking at my old notes and I realized that because Akhmedov and that other fight, I think that's what moved it there. So we'll go undercard. I'll change my pick. I'll go David Zawada against Ramzian Amiev. Good fight at welterweight. Zawada hasn't fought in a while, and how could you not like a guy who has a nickname like Sagat from Street Fighter in David Zawada?
I love it. That's a great fight to see. One that I'm looking forward to. I always love watching the big boys bang. Justin Tafa and Carlos Felipe. That's a really interesting matchup. You got Tafa that's coming off a big win over Juan Adams. Prior to that, he lost via KO to a friend of mine, Jorgen De Castro, who's from up my neck of the woods. No shame in losing to him. That guy's got some heavy hands. And Felipe actually beat Jorgen in his last fight. Prior to that, he lost to Sergey Spivak, who is very, very good on the ground. So this is an interesting matchup. I feel like it really could go either way. MMA math, if you want to go that way, which never really makes any sense. But Justin lost to Jorgen, and then Jorgen, he lost to Jorgen, and then Felipe beat Jorgen. So MMA math doesn't always work, but that's a fight I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, and it's a good, you see this every now and then where the UFC will kind of put prospects against each other. I do consider them both prospects because Felipe is 26, Tafa's 27. So they're trying to figure out who's the guy they're going to push in that division. You see that every now and then. They did this, in the heavyweight division last year when Cyril Gane fought Tanner Boser, both younger guys trying to figure out who the better guy is here. So I like Felipe in this fight. I think he gets it done, but it's one of those things where, Tafa has it's heavyweight, so any shot could end any fight. I just hope it's a good fight because heavyweight, it's either a nice finish or you end up getting a really boring decision. So hopefully we'll see a finish in this one.
Yeah, that would be great. Now, the fighter that you have to watch, according to me, this is a can't miss guy, Phil Hawes. This guy really could turn into a huge star. He's got a lot of power, and this is an interesting matchup against Imavov. So, when you look at this fight, how do you see this one shaking out?
It's a tough matchup for Phil. Phil had a long road to the UFC. He was on the Ultimate Fighter. He's won the Contender Series twice. He actually got knocked out in highlight reel fashion by Julian Marquez. Ended up coming back last summer, winning on Contender Series, and then getting the shot. He also had a little cup of coffee in PFL and World Series of Fighting. Ended up losing to Lewis Taylor. But I like the fact that Phil, took his time, and it's been a long road to the UFC. And I like the fact that he's at Hard Knocks, which is now Sanford MMA, getting to work with some really good fighters over there in, Kamaru Usman. Well, Usman's not there, but, Burns, Vicente Luque. There's a lot of good talent in that gym, and I think Hawes is going to put it together in this fight. Imavov is no one to slouch at, 9-2 record. They both have 9-2 records, actually. And Imavov looked pretty solid in that debut against Jordan Williams. But I like Phil Hawes as well. I think the timing of him coming into the UFC and him making his mark is great. And I just see Hawes getting a finish here. I think that power, I think what he brings to the table is going to be too much for a lot of those guys in this division. And I think it starts here with Imavov.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. All right, now the KO heard around the world. Buckley, he's back in the octagon. He's taking on Alessio Di Chirico. This is an interesting matchup. This is no slouch. Alessio is legit. He's 12-5. He has lost 3 in a row, but it's still like one of those matchups where, I don't want to say that they're giving Buckley a layup because that's definitely not the case. Any guy that's lost 3 in a row, he's going to be hungry. If you made it to the UFC, you're legit. But this is an interesting matchup for me. I think that the UFC wants Buckley to continue his star to rise. So I'm intrigued to see what happens here. What do you believe is going to come during fight night?
I do think it's kind of not a layup, but like a fight that Buckley should win. The only thing that concerns me here is through 17 career fights, Alessio Di Chirico never knocked out. So if Buckley can't go out there and get that big shot and win a knockout, can he win a decision? I'm not sure because we don't see him go the distance too often. It'll be interesting. I think the UFC feels like Di Chirico isn't as advertised, and I feel like they think that Buckley will knock him out. And so I think that's probably what we'll see in this fight because just Buckley hits so hard. And granted, he beat a guy in Jordan Wright who's been knocked out before. We got to point that out. But I think if he connects on Di Chirico, I think it would be an early night for him. But saying that, Di Chirico, I thought, beat Kevin Holland. I think you could make that argument. He's had some close fights. Even the Zach Cummins fight in his last fight, that was a close one, right? Like it wasn't a decisive win for Zach Cummins. It was one of those ones where you're kind of like, where are the judges going on this one? So in terms of being battle tested, Di Chirico has that in spades. But I think with Buckley's power, I think he'll probably go out there and knock him out. And if you guys bet, I believe Buckley by knockout is actually plus money. So that might be something worth taking a look at. But either way, I like Buckley in this fight.
Okay, yeah, me too. Is Buckley's KO, is that the KO of 2020? Is there one better?
It has to be, yeah, just from the way it unfolded and everything. There's been some good knockouts throughout the year, but that's got to be up there. That's got to be in your top 2 at least.
Yeah. Outside of Buckley, put these in order for me. Kevin Holland's most recent one, Rob Font over Moraes, and Jordan. I'm drawing a blank here. The KO slam, Jordan.
Jordan Levitt.
Yeah.
The monkey fight.
Okay.
And then Buckley's in that too.
No, just those 3. If Buckley's is the KO of the year, how would you rank those 3?
I would probably go Holland after that, because Holland's was cool, just the way he did it from the ground. And then probably Levitt, and then what was the other one? What was the other KO?
Rob Font over Moraes.
Probably Rob Font. Rob Font's KO was good. I think the significance of what Rob Font did was very important. But yeah, the knockout was, I don't think, was as flashy as those other two. But I'm curious to get your list. Where did you rank them?
Well, I have this sponsor, Costas. It's a restaurant in my area, and I just started this Costas KO of the month, and I bring on someone from my area to be kind of like my guest analyst, and he put his in order. Rob Font at the top, just because of the level of competition, beating Marlon Moraes like that. He had Kevin Hall in second, and then Jordan Levitt coming in third. I mean, however you want to look at it, all three of those knockouts were amazing. I can see it either any way. I do agree with what you said about Kevin Holland being at the top. I mean, over Jacare, that was an amazing knockout. And just the way he did it. When was the last time you've seen a knockout like that? That was amazing.
No, I agree. Lot of good performances last year, and pretty crazy considering, we were in a pandemic last year and we still had some great performances like that. So
yeah, no doubt about it. Now, the fight that I might be looking forward to as much as any on the main card, maybe outside of the Max Calvin fight, is this next one. Santiago Ponzinibio against Jing Liang Li. Both of these guys are studs. I'm big on Ponzinibio. I mean, he finished Neil Magny. I mean, look, if you finish Neil Magny, you are legit. And, Lee is a veteran himself, very well-rounded. Really, this could be my fight of the night. When you look at this fight, break it down for us, James.
Well, that's just it. So Ponzinibio, long layoff, had some injuries, got COVID as well. So this is his first fight since November of 2018. So is the layoff going to impact him? And he's not a young guy. He's 34. So in fight years, that's definitely getting up there a little bit. So how's he going to look after all that time off? He does come from a great camp and American Top Team, so he's getting to work with really good guys. But you mentioned MMA math earlier. Like, Ponzinibio finished Neil Magny. Jingling Lee just lost to Neil Magny last year. So it's one of those things where you could look at that and say, okay, well, who's the better fighter here? Here's what I think, Ryan. I think if Ponzinibio looks anything close to what he did back in November of 2018, getting that win over Neil Magny, he wins this fight all day. I mean, he's got a lot of advantages in the stand-up, on the ground, just a better athlete, better fighter on paper, in my opinion. The one thing, though, I do have to point out with Jingling Lee is that if you look at his resume right now, and I'm just double checking because I want to make sure I don't say something wrong, he's never been knocked out in his entire career. So if Ponzinibio can't finish him, you do wonder if, being out that long, if his cardio is going to be up to par. This is only a 3-round fight. We saw him finish Magny in the 4th. So that is kind of interesting to see if he's able to, keep up that pace. But I have a feeling Ponzinibio is going to win. I don't think we'll see a finish. That's another bet I would recommend. If you like Ponzinibio in this fight, I think right now he's almost about a 3-1 favorite. Why not take that decision prop? You can get him, I think, for close to plus money, if not plus money as it is, for him to go the distance, just because Lee's mainly going the distance a lot. And I don't see Lee finishing Ponzinibio. It could happen, but I like Ponzinibio. He's a better fighter here.
Yeah, you and me are on the same page again. Lee has so much heart. That's why I completely agree. I don't think he's going to get finished. He's one of those guys that really is. He's a live dog, and he's such a veteran. He's good no matter where the fight goes. So really intrigued about this fight. Now, the co-main event is really a style matchup where, I mean, if you're a hardcore fan, you can't miss this fight. I mean, the natural born killer, Carlos Condit and Matt Brown. I mean, what more needs to be said? I just really feel like there's going to be a lot of blood. There's going to be a lot of back and forth, a lot of heavy exchanges. I hope it goes the distance, because this really could be a fight where, maybe they could cap off their careers with just an amazing performance, or maybe there's not really necessarily a loser in this one, because they're both legends in a sense. You know what I mean? They haven't won Condit was the interim champion, but Brown never hoisting the belt. But this is just one of those fights that you really can't miss if you're a hardcore fan. When you look at this one, who do you feel like has the edge?
This is a tough one. I think this and the main event, and we'll talk about it obviously after this, but these are like the two closest fights in the card. Because here's the thing with Condit. I mean, he really has not looked the same since losing to, I think it was Lawler. Yeah, when he lost the title to Lawler all those ages ago. He had a really bad losing streak for a while there, but there was a common theme there. He was getting submitted, right? I mean, Matt Brown's not going to go out there and submit Carlos Condit. That's not going to happen. The other interesting thing is Matt Brown has still got knockout power at his age, at 40 years old. I mean, let's not forget, he knocked out Ben Saunders. He knocked out Diego Sanchez. I know he himself is coming off a knockout loss against Miguel Baeza, but Baeza looks like the future of that division. I see this is very interesting because Condit, I think his only TKO loss in the UFC was actually an injury. It was a knee injury to Tyron Woodley, which, it wasn't like a clean knockout. So Condit's still got a chin. I do wonder if this might be the fight where Condit's chin finally gives out and he gets knocked out by Matt Brown, because Matt Brown still got it. But if it doesn't, I think Condit wins. He's 4 years younger. a little bit taller. I think he uses his range, uses his speed a little bit better, and I think he picks up the decision. But I'm with you here. I think we're going to see a decision. But this is such a coin flip. Like, I think if Brown goes out there and either finishes or wins the decision against Condit, I'm not going to be surprised at all, because we're just not getting the same guys that we had a couple years ago. Fun fact, this fight was supposed to happen in 2013. Matt Brown gets a back injury. So here we are, 8 years later, finally getting this fight to fruition. It's pretty cool. And you talk about the popularity. I think that's why this is the co-main event, just with the names of Condit and Brown. They have to be in this spot just, for pure fanfare. And I give a slight edge to Condit in this one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When you look at fighters that have been around for a while, like both of these guys, you get into your 40s, you got a lot of fight mileage on your body. I hate to use BJ Penn as an example, but former champion, in his prime, one of the absolute best to ever do it. And he just stuck around and then accumulated a bunch of losses. And, the average fan, someone that might not know any better, would look at his record and think, oh, he's an average fighter, he's not that good, when in actuality, in his prime, he was one of the best. What's your take on that for fighters as far as legacy goes, and sticking around maybe longer than you should have?
Well, I think, to me, you can't look at it's like, you can't deny that BJ Penn was one of the greatest lightweight fighters of all time when he was in his prime. I don't care what happened after that. Some guys stick around a little bit too longer than they don't. Like Khabib's a good example, right? Like, Khabib retired, you could say, early. You could argue that, yes, he's got wins over McGregor and Gaethje and all these other good wins, but then you look at sort of the early half of his career, not a lot of good competition. So where do you gauge that? Like, I feel as though, like, someone like John Jones, for example, is almost, forget about the steroids, but like the fact that he fought nothing but killers throughout his career, even prior to the title, like after the title, he fought like a lot of really good guys. So it's tough to sort of gauge in terms of legacy, but I'm always of the thought of, like, look, you got to look at when they were in their prime, how they were. I think what happens after that, Father Time catches up to everyone. Most fighters don't retire off a win. That just doesn't happen. So it's like Fedor. Like, people want to say that Fedor sucks, he lost to Hendrick. Look, when Fedor was in pride, there was no one better in the world at heavyweight. So I feel the same way about Condit and Brown. These are two of the best welterweights to ever grace the octagon. I know Brown never won a title. Condit won an interim title. That still doesn't matter. You look at the quality of wins, the quality of opposition they fought. That's got to put them up there as some of the best of all time in that division.
Yeah, well said. All right, now this main event is really one of those fights where it could be one of the best fights of the year. Calvin Kattar is one of those guys that's just been ascending for a while now. He's got a ton of power, coming from, my neck of the woods here in New England. He's got a great team behind him, and he's taking on the former champion, Max Holloway, who, in my opinion, I thought he won that second fight against Volkanovski. Volkanovski's still the champion. That's why, Dana White says never let it go to the judges. But this is an intriguing matchup for me because Holloway, he's still, I believe, in his prime, and I think he's got a chip on his shoulder going against a guy that has got a lot of steam behind him. This is one of those fights where I can see it going either way. Before I say what my take is, I want to get your take on it and have you break this down from your eyes.
First thing I want to point out is that Max Holloway is younger than Calvin Kattar. I think a lot of people forget that. When you talk about Kattar, just because he doesn't have as many fights in the UFC, you almost think that he's the younger guy, but he's not. Kattar's 32, Holloway's 29. Just throwing that out there because I think that's, like, people kind of forget that when they're describing this fight. But you're right. A lot of people felt like Holloway won that last fight against Volkanovski. He's still competing at a high level. People will point to the loss to, the losses to Volkanovski or the loss to Poirier, but the reality is this guy has fought probably one of the hardest runs in the UFC if you look at level of opposition, leading up to even this fight. And this is actually his first non-title fight since 2016. Can you believe that? We're talking 5 years ago that he has, had to fight for titles or had title fights. So, it's still 5 rounds. It doesn't make a difference, but still, I just wanted to point that out that this guy's just been, fighting the who's who. So there's that out of the way. And then, in terms of the skills, Kattar, the thing I love about Kattar is that, he'll lose a fight, but then he'll get even better the next 2 fights. Like that fight against Ige, he had to dig deep and he got it done and he just took over the fight as it went on. The fight before that knocked out Jeremy Stevens, something Zabit Magomedsharipov couldn't do. This is a guy that you're just seeing the evolution in his boxing, and kudos to Tyson Chartier, who's looking like an absolute wizard lately with, Rob Font's big win, and I'm sure his preparations here for Calvin. So Calvin's absolutely can win this fight. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Here's what I think is going to happen. I think this fight's going the distance. Holloway's never been finished. Kattar's never been finished. You're talking about 2 guys who are durable as hell, especially Holloway when he fought Poirier. You look at his face in that fight. He still kept coming forward, so I don't think it'll be there. I give a slight edge to Holloway in this fight, and the reason I do is just level of opposition. Kattar has some good wins, but you look at who he's fought overall, you can't put that against Max Holloway's resume. Aldo twice, Volkanovski twice, all types. Pettis. He's fought just, former champions. There's just so much more experience that Holloway has in the octagon. McGregor as well. Like, that you just can't put a price on. And I think when it comes down to it in those later rounds, that's where it's going to be a game of inches, as they say in football. I think the same thing's here. And I think with Holloway's just a little bit of extra experience, he goes out there and takes the decision. I'll tell you the best bet on this card is betting this fight by decision. I'd be shocked if Kattar gets finished or Holloway gets finished. And Kattar can throw some bombs and so can Holloway, but he's Hawaiian. I mean, it's in their blood to just go 5 rounds. I mean, you rarely see a Hawaiian get finished in a fight. So, I think Holloway just slightly edges it out, but I think it'll be more of a clear decision this way, whereas like it's not going to be like any thought that Kattar's going to take it home. I think Holloway will win sort of like a close fight, but one where you're not like, that was a robbery.
If Kattar does take this to a decision and loses, but shows a lot of heart and comes to fight and it's a close fight, what does this do for his standing at 145? Does it drop him, or does it maybe keep him right there in that potential title picture in the near future?
Yeah, that's another thing we didn't talk about, is sort of the pressure of who's on in this fight. The pressure is absolutely on Max here. If Max loses this, that'll be 3 losses in a row. I don't care what you said about the fight before, because the reality is it's still a loss. So what does he do? He can't, if he stays at featherweight, it's got to be a long road back to the title, because if you lose 3 fights, you need at least 3 wins, I would think, after that to get back to the title. And I know it's Max Holloway, but still, that division, you've got Shark circling, you've got Ortega, and I know he beat Ortega, but still, you got Ortega, you've got, Zabit, you've got Yair, you've got Zombie off a loss, but if Zombie gets another win, he's right back in the picture as well. So Holloway would be very back from this, and I think if he loses, it might be the end of him at 145. I think you could see him go to 155. You see him again in interviews, he does not look great. It's a tough cut for him. So I just wanted to point that out first. For Kattar, I think if he loses this, it doesn't matter, because we just saw him lose to Zabit. What was it? 2019. He won 2 fights last year, and now he's back in the saddle, so to speak. This is almost a title fight, right? So I think if Kattar loses again, he's not going anywhere. He doesn't have a super tough cut to 145. He'll be sticking around, and I think he's fine. But with Max, it's because he's had those title shot opportunities already that sort of puts him back further. So yeah, pressure-wise, Holloway's got all the pressure here. I think Kattar, even if he loses, I think his stock will go up, especially if it goes the distance. And 2, I think he could get 2 more wins and then he's right back in the saddle. So that's my thoughts on the fight.
Yeah, no, and I do agree. My heart says Calvin. I do want him to win this fight, but I'm leaning with you. My head thinks that, over a 5-round war, I do feel like the experience that Max has had against that top-level opposition might be the difference here. But either way, this is a phenomenal main event to kick off the 3 fights here in Abu Dhabi. This starts at 12 noon. The prelims start at 12 noon on the East Coast. The main card starts at 3 p.m. here on the East Coast. So make sure you're tuning in early. This isn't one of those normal night cards that we're getting. So again, James, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate your knowledge and helping me break this down. Before I do let you go, tell everyone where they can find your work and plug your social media.
Ryan, first off, thanks for having me on here. Always love doing podcasts and breaking down fights. So thank you so much for having me on. Your listeners, best way to get a hold of me, at Lynch on Sports, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, youtube.com/Lynch on Sports. I do work for 12 other outlets. I always put my interviews in playlists, so you can find them on there. It's easy to find all that stuff. And I also have content up there every single day. I just broke down the Fight Island 8 card on my channel this morning. You guys can check that out on my channel. Thanks so much for watching. And thanks again, Ryan, for having me. This was a lot of fun.